welcome to the first council meeting for tonight. Seen you all New Year, so I hope you all have a lovely Christmas break. I look forward to a productive year this year, and as a team kick some goals, and as a council all together doing some great stuff for the community. If you would like to stand with country. The City of Victor Harbor acknowledges the Rangeri and the traditional custodians of the land and the our respect is extended to Aboriginal and country.
The City of Victor Harbor is committed to diversity, equity and inclusion. We respect people of all ages, abilities, genders, sexualities, backgrounds, culture and belief.
We recognise the brave individuals who have served and continue to serve our nation. Remember those who have lost their lives and paid the ultimate sacrifice to our country.
Somebody like to.
Mighty God, we ask you to bring about to be a change, city and direct and proclamations, honouring of the of the people.
Thank you very much. We do have a couple of apologies this evening, Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Martin. We have got one item that has adjourned, and the recommendation was an amended recommendation up to the adjournment that in relation to the speed zone reduction to and Flinders. That was moved by Councillor Schofield and seconded by, but I'm happy Councillor Henderson again and so I'll do those on projects.
Just more a clarification question. When Angela discussions last made sense, and I was just wanted to check the discussions we had was for discussions with the Department of saying that a substantial implementation upgrade work. I understand about page 4. I'm just wondering what the concerns. They're saying it doesn't cater for safe pedestrian shared level environment, talking about Albert Place up to
Thank you, through the Mayor. So those comments were prior to Main Street Stage 4 being done, so that work has been done since. So all the pedestrian crossings and changing the pavement and changing the look to make it more of a low-speed environment has been complete, as well as at the corner of Coral Street and Flinders Parade, sorry, and the crossing on the Esplanade. So we've done the work now, hence the going back and asking for speed reduction.
And I understand that, but we're talking specifically Albert Place to section of the Esplanade was discussed to be added after that. I understand for the other areas. So I just wanted to check, was there any concerns the Department of Information
Through the Mayor, I can't concerns will be following council's approval tonight. If it is approved, we would
So there
then
hasn't been-
consult. Not since, no.
Hopefully now that we've got a diagram showing that we're not approaching to further down the road, I think people will concerned that might be coming up near Newland Church and close to Victoria Street. It's just to cover that area, which is got Nino's, Cafe Primo, etc., etc. And because now that's stage 5, was it? That little part was stage 4. Yes, that part was part of. That has been upgraded with pram ramps, which cross from the Oceane Street side across the other side of the road. And I've had this experience only 2 weeks ago where I parked, not me literally, but my husband parked on the Primo side, and then going across from there to Nino's. You know, I wasn't aware of the speed of a car coming through there, and basically had to be pulled back to not cross the road. And so we shouldn't need 50 k's or 40 k's, whatever the limit is in that particular area. During Schoolies, that speed limit comes down around that area. So it's just a way to have that shared pedestrian and traffic sort of situations. So, but now.
Councillor Quaremba?
Thank you, Mayor. My concern is that while this may seem like a good idea when there's people there, speed limits are 24 hours around the clock, correct? So it'll be 30 kilometres there when there's no one there, and it'll be a finable offence. Is that correct?
Make
Okay.
the speed limit a definable
Yep.
offence, councillor.
So is this a slow march to get rid of cars completely out of the CBD? Is that kind of where we're heading? Going to go down to 20? Is this sort of calling it quits at 30? And
Councillor
know.
Quaremba, you would need to ask, this came on a notice. I haven't had any discussions with her. She has got some idea of removing us from Vic Harbour, and this is a march towards transport.
no, I said in the CBD. I would hope we wouldn't get rid of vehicles in Victor because that would kill the town. But now that you mention it, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Is there any other commentary? Councillor Schofield, would you like to close?
I will say that it is a good idea and it is necessary. Weekends, long weekends, and the public, the Christmas break that we've just had, accidents are just waiting to happen, and these are where the people just walk anywhere they want to. Children are getting out of cars. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. That closes the debate. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you. We now move to 4.2, which is another adjourned item, the Unsolicited Proposal Policy and Guidelines Review. This was moved by Councillor Mann and seconded by Councillor Henderson. And because it has been a couple of months since we've looked at this, and if you'd like to, does anybody have they want to add to? Councillor Quaremba.
Thank you, Mayor. I did have amendments, and I'm just wondering, I don't think they've been added in. I'm just questioning for the CEO why they haven't been added.
As Councillor Quaremba, as if you read the commentary on page 12, at the November council meeting, you withdrew a motion on notice regarding delegations of the Chief Executive Officer with respect to unsolicited proposals. And there is an opportunity for you to raise further amendments to the draft policy if you want to make them, given that you previously withdrew.
Yeah, I withdrew that on the premise that my amendments would be added in, but they haven't been added in. That's the only reason I did it. I guess my other question would be then, is there any situation in which a solicited bid proposal would not come to the chamber.
Through the Mayor, if I may, pretty much every single unsolicited proposal that has come into council, even the ones that we haven't considered as a committee or under my recommendation or delegation, haven't come to the council to inform you of the reasons why. So the decisions to progress or otherwise do come to the chamber.
Yeah.
So the policy outlines that I have the delegation to have that initial meeting, to have an assessment, to form a committee, and then to consider whether it progresses. And they usually progress initially by way of a workshop and then by resolution to the council.
Yeah, but that means that by rights, if your committee and yourself decide that they shouldn't go ahead, we'll just be notified of that decision, not actually be able to make a
Yes,
decision.
You would be notified, but again, you would still be able to make a decision. It
So we
doesn't.
can change that.
Absolutely. Just because I have a delegation, it doesn't take away from the council's powers at any time to override that delegation. I'm required to inform you of why I would recommend that it is not proceeding, and then you as a chamber would make that decision accordingly.
Because I do recall there was a situation, I think, where a proposal wasn't actually presented to the council. I think there was one that didn't come to the chamber and that we were told about well after the fact.
Can
So
you recall, can you remind us what
I
that
think it
is?
was in confidence. So I can't say what it was about, but I think I see you nodding. You understand what I was saying? Or there was one that was in regards to some
Again,
land.
I would inform you, even though it would be via workshop, of the reasons why, but that doesn't negate anyone, a member within the chamber, to come forward with a motion on notice to say you actually wish
Okay.
it to progress.
Great.
But I base my decisions on the guidelines and principles of the council, and then always inform you of whatever decision I make. It does not negate the council from making its own decisions.
Okay. So that in every unsolicited bid proposal, regardless of whether you agree
The
or not,
members are
it'll come back to
informed
the
of
member
what happens,
and we
yes.
can make a change with a motion on notice. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Is there any more discussion in relation to that recommendation? Councillor Mann, did you want to close the debate? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move to 5.1, minutes of the previous meeting. And the minutes of the ordinary council meeting, which were on the 16th of December, be confirmed as true and accurate. Does someone want to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded Councillor Schiller. Any questions in relation to those minutes? Councillor Quaremba? I
Just
don't
a
think
question.
you were at the meeting on December.
Yeah, hence my question. What is the protocol for elected members if you're not at a meeting, and while I can watch the video and potentially listen to the tape, how can I vote to substantiate whether the minutes are true and reflective if I wasn't here? Does that mean I have to vote against it?
Through the mayor? No, it's, you don't, you're obligated if you're in the meeting, if you're here to actually receive the minutes. The minutes are a reflection of the meeting. If for any reason there isn't something that's substantiated or a decision is not correct, or a member who was present is unable to confirm that that decision is correct, then you've got the ability to amend it, but it doesn't mean that you would vote against it.
Any further questions? Sorry, any further questions about the minutes? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. There are no deputations, there are no questions from the gallery, and there are no petitions. So we move on to 9.1, outstanding resolutions. And the recommendation is that council receive and note the January report. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconding Councillor Mann. Would you like to speak to the report, Councillor Henderson? Councillor Mann? Does anybody want to speak to the report or have any questions? Councillor Burns?
Just to say, Mayor, that I've read through everything. There's nothing of any concern. Everything's self-explanatory, so I'm happy to support it.
Okay. If that's the case, Councillor Burns, you really don't need to speak to it, just to tell us that you don't need to speak to it, just for time purposes. If there's no further discussion, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The Mayoral report 9.2, And the recommendation is that council receive and note the report for period of October to December. Moving that way, councillor Schofield. And seconding that, councillor Schiller. Do either of you want to have any questions about that? Does anybody have any questions about that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.3, the reviewed council member access to information. The recommendation is that council adopt the reviewed council member access to information policy as provided at attachment 1. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, councillor Mann. And seconding, please, councillor Henderson. Councillor Mann, do you want to speak to that? Councillor Henderson, does anybody want to speak to that or have any questions? Councillor Burns and then councillor Quaremba.
Thank you, Mayor. I've read through this, but I can't support it, especially around the policy statement changes. I am concerned that it's restricting both accountability and transparency of the council, but also that elected members have a right under the Local Government Act to ask for information, and there's a couple of qualifiers or exclusions, and I think this is putting an additional level of bureaucracy, but also just restricting what should be free access. I mean, I just view that if there's nothing to hide, why would you want to put conditions on it? And I think that for a healthy council, we get requests from the community. We want to understand information when we make decisions, and I think that should be without any restraint. Obviously, if we're asking for something unreasonable that requires an unreasonable amount of work by council, obviously the CEO will, discuss that with us. But outside of that, I'm not quite sure why we need to have this level of restriction on information. I believe the Local Government Act is clear and is sufficient, but that's just my opinion.
I completely agree, councillor Burns, in terms of the Local Government Act saying that elected members are able to have information. This policy, reading it, seeks to facilitate access to relevant information, but the Local Government Act doesn't say that we as elected members are able to have any information that we want. It has to be related to us carrying out our role as elected members. So if we want operational information, then that is not our role as elected members. And the purpose of the policy is to make it much more clear so that people are able to access the information that they require in their role as an elected member.
Administration are proposing that we don't get information because that information may be potentially detrimental to the council. I have a problem with that.
Where does it say that, councillor Burns? 57 at the top.
It says such information may potentially harm council, the community, or other party involved.
This is in relation to sensitive, personal, private and confidential information, councillor Burns. So that's specifically relating to that information, and it's around public availability of that information.
Yeah, but I think we're not talking about staff's personal information. We're talking about potentially something that could be sensitive because there is a potential of impact on the council. And my understanding is that's not reasons for confidentiality, nor is it reasons for excluding members from accessing it to be better informed. We get a privilege to a lot of stuff in confidence that doesn't go public, and I just think any restriction is a concern.
Thank you, councillor Burns. Councillor Quaremba.
Thank you, Mayor. Just question, you alluded to that the council will decide or determine what information is relevant. Who makes that judgment of relevance for information being released to an elected member? If the elected member believes that that information is relevant, whether it be historical, current, to better inform them to make a decision, who is the arbiter of, I guess, whether information is relevant or not?
That would be the CEO, and I would suggest that if you want to ask something, then you make an appointment and have a chat with the CEO about whether or not the information that you're requesting is relevant to your role as an elected member. Do you want to expand on that, Victoria?
Through the Mayor, if I may, I guess the context of the policy may be not quite understood. As elected members, when you're in the chamber collectively making decisions on particular matters, you are you have access to all the information that's relevant to those matters that are before the chamber, and members will ask for additional information about those matters that you're considering. The policy, as like all policies, are really put in place provisions for the extreme. This is about council members, as in individual members also, could apply or ask for information that may have no relevance to something that's before you. So examples may be you're a new elected member and suddenly you're wanting to interrogate and find out information about your neighbour, and you come to me and go, I want to have all the information about my neighbour, and I'll go, actually, it's not relevant to your role as an elected member. It's nothing that's before the chamber making a decision, so I would decline it. It's on a case-by-case basis. In most circumstances, members who are researching about a matter and it's historical, we will seek and find that information for you because it's relevant to something you may be making a decision, or you could be researching because you're about to foreshadow a motion on notice about something. Absolutely, I would consider that and go, yes, we'll see what we can find. If it was extreme research, like required to go to archives for weeks on end, I'd probably go, you might want to do a motion on notice because I'd need to add additional resources to go and find that information for you specifically as an elected member, as opposed it's collectively for the whole chamber. But in most cases, I have to consider it on its merits. So it's there to, I suppose, protect the council as a whole and also individuals, not just staff, but also members of the public, because again, you don't always have great individuals with great intent, but most cases, in my experience, you do. So it's a case-by-case basis where I may have to refuse it. You can object to that refusal and go down the various paths. So there's also those opportunities as well.
Okay. So is there any document, say, that an FOI wouldn't be able to get to, or?
Yes,
and I can understand. There is documents.
Yep, absolutely. I deal with numerous FOIs all the time, and we exclude and refuse information all the time because sometimes it's a third party's information. So we must apply to the third party and go, we have these documents, we've got an FOI, someone wants to access those documents, do you approve? Because they're actually yours, not ours, we just hold them in our records. That third party will refuse them.
Yeah.
Or we have to redact information because it has personal information. And sometimes I have to release a document that's got one line and the rest is blacked out. So there is lots of information under the FOI Act and the various acts, about 47 of them that we administer, that I can't release just generally because there's other obligations.
Yeah, I can understand redacting information to preclude names or addresses and things of that nature, or contractual things. I guess my concern with this, on face value, like I said, Councillor Burns said, it just seems like it seems to be something that is stopping elected members from what they believe to be their roles. And that's, I guess, where the difference of opinion is what we as elected members may believe our role is and what administration believes our role to be. And then what, more importantly, what does the community expect us to do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's where we actually work together. I'm here in the best interest of the community. I'm a public servant. That's my role, to run the City of Victor Harbor and work with the elected members so you can be the best elected members that you can. We all have the same outcome and intent, but I have obligations as an officer that I'm responsible for. Sometimes it's protecting elected members. Most of the time it's working with elected members to help you do a good job. So it's not seen as this is the administration trying to keep information from elected members. This is the administration working with elected members, making sure we all fulfil our obligations and roles and responsibilities.
And just one final question. The basis of this policy would have come from a standard document that all council would be.
Every council is required to have one of these policies because why the Act stipulates, so that the actual policy highlights most of the provisions in the Act.
Yeah.
And it would just most of the time also articulate our unique processes or procedures we may go through as a council. But yes, this is actually based on updated model policies that the LGA will administer. Hence, you know, they're not always the same. So a lot of these changes are based on the model policies that may have been updated, legislative changes and changes in our functions and processes.
So it would be fair to say then that there be councils out there that wouldn't have this level of
Most councils will have
inclusions.
probably exactly the same policy as what you've got for you.
word for word.
Not word for word. Every
Okay.
council is slightly different. Some of them are sound more restrictive and aren't quite as friendly. What we
Yeah.
try to do is show that this is not about restricting elected members. It's about how you access information, be clear about what you're accessing and a process that you go through.
Is there any further discussion? If not, councillor Mann, do you want to close the debate? No, I'll put this to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you.
Call a division, please.
Would like a division. All those in favour, please stand. Councillor Mann, Councillor Kemp, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson. And those against, Councillor Burns and Councillor Quaremba. That motion has passed. We now move on to the 2024 Local Government Association Ordinary General Meeting, the call for proposed items of business. The recommendation is to appoint myself as the voting delegate and the Deputy Mayor as the proxy delegate to the OGM from January this year until the periodic elections in November at the end of next year. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Burns, thank you. And do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Mann. Any discussion? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move to 10.1 and we're looking at the Schoolies Festival major application. I'm happy to do it on block because it all relates to the Schoolies event. And this is something that normally we would look at doing every single year, but with this particular motion, we're approving the grant to Encounter Youth for staging the Schoolies for a 2-year period, subject to the following conditions, which we are all familiar with, we do every year. You happy to move that on block, Councillor?
No, I'd like to make an amendment, please.
Which recommendation would you like to amend?
I just want to go back to 1 year.
Okay, so all right, we'll do this on a so that's the recommendation as is, but just for 25-26,
Correct.
correct? And you happy to move it that way? Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Stuart Burns. Sorry? Councillor Quaremba moved it. No, he's moving the motion. And Councillor Burns, Councillor Quaremba, would you like to speak to that? And I'd be interested in hearing why you only want to do it for 1 year.
I think they should be judged on their actions each year and every year, and it's pretty simple. I think unless there's some sort of recourse where we can pull the funding if it isn't suited to the City of Victor Harbor. I know that this will take them to the end of this term, I believe, and then next term we'll have a new council. I don't think it's fair to potentially lump a new council with decisions like this. Let it be based on its merits.
Thank you. Councillor Burns, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I only had a single issue when I was reading this, which was the 2-year period. I actually thought everything else was fine. I just had concerns that 12 months allows the council to review post a Schoolies event. and gives us the opportunity of providing feedback or any changes before the next year's event. And I know in probably be argued by members that we have that opportunity, but I think it's not just about locking in funding, it's also, I think, diminishing our leverage. I think it's such an important event, and they've been very fortunate not really having any major incidents, and I think that they change and grow and adapt and learn from each year, and I think it gives a 12-month review, gives council the opportunity to implement any further changes. After last year's, I met with the CEO and provided some feedback. We had a really good discussion, and I'm not sure that that could necessarily occur if it was every 2 years. I think the period is just a little bit too long.
Can you speak into your microphone, please, Councillor
Sorry.
Burns?
Yeah, other than that, I was fine with what was proposed.
Thank you. Councillor Schiller?
I'm also supportive of only going for the 1 year. And I do this with the thought that there is some businesses out there that still are not supportive of that location. I think we need to go ahead with the forthcoming year, but it's up to anyone who has suggestions to come and see councillors and articulate their concerns to us, and listen. We will listen. But at this stage, I haven't had a direct conversation with businesses, but I have heard bits and pieces, and hope that by just allowing that 1 year allocation, they have the opportunity to put their case across again.
Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, personally, I would be fine with the 2 years. Encounter Youth do such an exceptional job each and every year, and we honestly would be lost without them and their volunteers. I guess I appreciate, though, the views of the fellow elected members. I'm happy to put that, agree with that single year, because, you know, it may be the case that in that following year that we allocate more funding than the 21,500 to help support them. So that's always up for consideration in that year. But yeah, I'm happy to support this one.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Henderson?
I would have been happy with the 2 years too, because this has been run so well for so long now. I think they have a proven track record, and they don't need to keep proving themselves any longer, because I think they do run this event extremely well. In my 6 and a bit years on the council, I haven't had a single person approach me with any complaint to do with the Schoolies. So that's it. I would have been happy with 2 years. So I won't support the 1 year.
Councillor Schofield, did you want to speak to this?
Look, I agree with what's been said. And the time that I've been on council, and the time that I've actually lived in the city, there's been huge improvements, and they keep improving every year. I understand the reasons why to go back to 1 year. Yeah, I'm still thinking about it as I sit here right at this moment, because I think both have got equally good ideas.
Thank you. I think Councillor Kemp, you're the only one that hasn't spoken. Did you want to say something?
Yes, I support the 1 year. To me, this is bracket creep. You do it for 2 years, a couple of years later, it'll be 5 years, then 7 years. So I see the 1 year aspect is about reviewing it and making sure that we got it right, even though we do a review after, but which I don't quite sure if that comes to the chamber or not, the actual review after the event. I haven't seen one yet. But yeah, I prefer the 1 year because there could be changes that I think the chamber may need to be here to make decisions on. So I think we like to review it each year.
Thank you. Councillor Quaremba, did you want to close the debate?
Yes, please. I guess I can understand why people may say 2, but at the end of the day, I know there's a lot of people in the community that don't want this to go ahead at all. So I think it's important that we send a message to those people that, yes, they are going to be given an opportunity to continue for 1 year, but we'll be keeping them under review. I think going for 2 years just sends a message that it's carte blanche and go ahead and do it. The other thing is too that I'd just like to express the fact that they call it an alcohol and drug-free event. While that may be the case at the venue, I'm pretty sure we all witnessed plenty of drinking at the caravan parks, and I know that they did have a alcohol-free zone in the caravan park. So I kind of find it a little bit misleading to say that it's a drug and alcohol-free event, especially for parents that may be reading that thinking that their children won't be drinking, which is not the case. So I just want to make that point about the way they advertise their event. But as I said, 1 year we can review it, and I would foreshadow that at the end of the year, we should go out to the community in a broader consultation and actually asking the community at Broad whether they want this event to continue.
Thank you, Councillor Quaremba. I'll just draw your attention to the fact that the Schoolies Festival is located on Warland Reserve, the caravan park, and where the young people decide to stay is not in the remit of the Schoolies Festival. So they can drink in the caravan park and up and down the streets and wherever they like. But the Schoolies and in town is a dry zone. And so
Point of
that's
order, Mayor.
correct. Thank you very much.
Point of order, Mayor.
The debate is
That's
closed.
actually incorrect. They sell the tickets for the caravan park through the Schoolies website, so they're in association with the event. So it's misleading, and we need to be honest about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quaremba. I don't take your point of order. I am providing guidance to the council and
Point of order,
providing.
Mayor.
So,
The
Councillor,
truth is the truth, whether you like it or not.
Quaremba, if you continue to argue with me, I will ask you to leave. I'm saying I reject your point of order. My role as mayor is to provide guidance to the council and to make sure that the council has all the information. The Schoolies Festival is a dry zone within Victor Harbour. Where Schoolies decide to stay, whether they book themselves or whether they book through the website of Encounter Youth is up to them. If there was not a Schoolies Festival here, they would still go to the caravan parks. They would still come to Victor Harbour, but they would not have the support of the Schoolies Festival. Thank you. The debate is closed. I'll now move all those in favour. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move to the Code Amendment, Precinct 202, the Consultation Feedback Report. The first recommendation is that Council receive a notice of submissions received. Would somebody like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Mann. And Councillor Henderson. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Mann, the first recommendation? Councillor Henderson. Does anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the submissions? I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Receiving and noting the submissions. All those in favour? It's very difficult for me to progress in a natural manner when people are not putting up their hands and then putting up their hands late, and I'm not sure whether they're in favour or not in favour. Can I please go through this again? All those in favour, can you put up your hand? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. The second recommendation, that's carried rather. The second recommendation is that Council provide instructions to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, requesting the removal of the police station and courthouse land from the Code Amendment. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, thank you. And Councillor Schofield seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Mann.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting, and just to point out that, you know, on that land already is a public-private partnership that the state government entered into. So I think it just highlights, I guess, that whilst this is a newer area for councils, I think it's something that the state government's been doing for some time and have some experience in.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. It's a good point. Any further discussion? All those in favour? Those against? Thank you very much. Recommendation 3, that following the closing the loop component of the draft report, Council authorise the CEO to finalise the engagement report through the 4 points. Moving that way, Councillor Mann, and seconding that, Councillor Schiller. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I totally understand all the arguments and what's being proposed. However, I have to take consideration that of the community consultation, everyone was against it. And as I'm representing here the community, I can't support this.
Thank you, councillor Burns. Any further discussion? Councillor Quaremba.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to clarify, and I'm sure you've already said this, but regardless of whether a developer builds on that land or the council builds on that land, this code amendment would have to proceed irrespective, correct?
Through the Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, councillor Mann, do you want to close the debate? I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The Palms Estate consultation, access links to Oceane development, and councillor Schiller, you want to move the motion. I understand.
The motion, please.
Yep. Oops, sorry. And what's the adjustment that you want to make to the motion?
In our report, we have got an estimate of the width that pathway will be, and I'd like to have it stating that it be no less than 8 metres wide, the width of that pathway from Hindmarsh River right through to Adelaide Road. Doesn't mean there might be spots where it can be wider, but make sure we don't go any narrower than 8 metre width.
So just for your benefit, Angela, on the board, it has been put the development to make provisions for a continuous pedestrian and cycle link to be no less than 8 metres in width within the Strawberry Hills Road Reserve.
Yep. And I'll speak to it if I get a seconder.
Yep. Have we got a seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Burns. Councillor Schiller, do you want to speak to that?
I think this is a showing when we've gone out to consultation and we've heard that people were quite protective of that Strawberry Hill Lane Road, whatever you want to call it. I've looked at it, I've walked the whole area, including looking at Coromandel Drive, and Coromandel Drive is a maze. The footpath along Coromandel Drive is, to put it bluntly, very unsatisfactory. As we go forward, I think we need to do better with our footpaths. There's a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of people parking their cars on the footpath along Coromandel Drive. So by having 131 and then also having a nice wide pathway, which also will allow emergency egress from Adelaide Road back down to the river, is essential. We don't want it to be too narrow, because if it's too narrow, it's going to feel like a back lane rather than a nice place to walk. Also, in deliberations, we talked about once you can get to the end of Adelaide Road, I would like to further pursue whether there's an option to allow at least some kind of pedestrian access south down to Adelaide Road, not just north, because north, as stated by a member of the public, to go from the end of Strawberry Hills Road to Adelaide Road to a pedestrian spot is sort of leading to nowhere. So it would be better if we were able to, and if it's logistically possible, to look at a pedestrian path heading south towards the township.
Thank you, councillor Schiller. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I was also going to propose something similar, except go for the 10 metres, but I accept the 8 metres. I was mainly looking at 10 metres because of the sewer infrastructure. I had walked down the laneway as well, and I think it's a good compromise for the community in that it provides still some land for the developer where they're going to widen the road and put bike paths in, but it still retains pedestrian and bicycle connection between the houses and Adelaide Road. So I think it's a good compromise, and I'd like to see more compromises like this when we do consultation. I think it's good.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Kemp?
Just a question. With my understanding, I think in our workshop, wasn't Riverview Crescent or Court looked at as an opportunity to have access to Oceane Estate?
I'll
Or
pass
maybe it was
that
just
over.
mentioned, but nothing was done.
I'll pass that to Graham.
Through the mayor, sorry, I didn't quite catch the question. Riverview Court connection.
Yeah, but from my understanding in a workshop, we discussed Riverview Court as an option to have access through to Oceane Estate.
Yes, and that could still be used as an option into the future. If council so desired, it wasn't part of the consultation piece. That was just in accordance with what the council had resolved in terms of the consultation. I think the key issue with Riverview is that it would have to divert into the council reserve on the riverside to come around because of the development that's on the, or it would require an acquisition of some land. Yep.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Schiller, do you want to close the debate? I'll put this to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor, can I have a question just on procedures? Are we voting on amendments or voting on variations? It was two of the agenda items. There were changes made by the chamber. I'm just wondering whether they're amendments or variations, because we just went straight through to voted on them.
They were neither. The mover is able to move a motion, and if they want to amend the motion themselves, they can do that, as long as the seconder agrees with what the amendment was. So in the last case, for example, Councillor Schiller moved the motion, but she wanted to move it with the inclusion of an 8-metre path, and that was seconded. So there was no amendment and there was no variation.
The one on the Schoolies was an amendment, because I heard Councillor Quaremba ask for an amendment, and we should have voted on the amendment.
No, Councillor, my understanding is Councillor Quaremba moved the motion with the he changed that from 2 years to 1 year, but he was the mover, and he moved the motion with 2 years and 1 year, and that was seconded by Councillor Burns, who agreed with what Councillor Quaremba wanted. We now move to number 11, Corporate and Customer Services, and we're looking at the capital project. Oh, hang on, have we got straight, but we did all of the last, hang on. Did we do recommendation 2 and 3, the last one? Or do we just do recommendation 1? Oh, okay. Yep, okay. So the 12.1 capital projects update, and the recommendation is that council receive a note the update for the second quarter of 24-25 report. If someone would like to move that way. Councillor Kemp, thank you, and Councillor Henderson seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to it?
No, just one of the questions I would have for it is it's good to have the update of what's happening, but again, well, I'd like to know about this time into the financial year, the 3/4 of the year is basically how are we going? Are we on track, or are we behind in some of those projects, or we're not going to finish them? I mean, if you're going to give it an update, you should give us a proper update showing timelines and whether we're going to be achievable or make some savings.
If I may, through the mayor. So we do that as part of the budget reviews. So we do a quarterly review of the budget, and in that quarterly review, we give you an update on how we're progressing with the budgets and also the KPIs that the council has set and whether we're on track or completed or whether we're having any challenges. So that report will be coming to the February meeting because it will be presented to the Audit and Risk Committee meeting next week first. So this is really just the capital projects because again, council has expressed just an update on capital works and the progress of those big significant items. So this is in addition to the quarterly budget review, which you will receive, which is giving you the responses to the questions you've just asked.
So, Councillor Kemp, this is a proper update in relation to the capital projects. Councillor Quaremba, you want to say something?
I was just a question regarding those quarterly reviews. If I'm sure these projects will be done via Gantt chart or some sort of timeline, would the elected members be able to get that at the quarterly review?
We don't tend to give the Gantt chart, but I can provide it to members so you can have a look at how those projects are progressing.
Great, thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to make comment that I actually find this report very helpful and it's a good summary breakdown. I understand the budget ones we get with more detail, but I actually look forward to these because they're actually very helpful. It would be nice at some point to also get a similar one on the computer system update, just so we know, that it's still on track or whatever. I understand it'll be mentioned in the budget, but just as an update would be useful.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Is there any further discussion? No. Councillor Kemp, do you want to close the debate? I'll put this to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Minutes of the Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee. The recommendation is that council receive and note them. Moving that way, Councillor Schiller, and seconding Councillor Henderson. Does anybody have any questions about those minutes? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The subsidiaries and representative reports. The first one is the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority Equipment Replacement Loan recommendation. And the recommendation is that council approve the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority Executive Officer to apply for a loan with the Local Government Finance Authority as a replacement of equipment damaged in an accident. Somebody like to move that way? Councillor Quaremba. And seconding that, Councillor Henderson. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Quaremba?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I don't know where to begin here. So we're being asked to put in our percentage of $500,000 for a vehicle that was in an accident. We haven't had a report regarding that accident. We don't know anything about this. We don't know, and I have to ask the question, is the insurance the local, the mutual liability scheme that would cover this vehicle?
Through the Mayor, that's correct. And we're not actually being asked to put in our share. The subsidiaries are required to seek permission from all constituent councils before they apply for a loan. So they're looking to apply for the loan.
Correct. We'd be a guarantor on that loan, correct?
Well, we are the parent company of the subsidiary.
Right. So I think it's prudent that we would at least find out exactly why, at least some of the information about this incident, because I've heard anecdotally a lot of things about this, and I just would like to hear a report from the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority about it. And yeah, it's just, there's a lot of information missing here, and we're just going to, go guarantor on a loan. I just think it's important. I mean, I haven't seen, maybe the CEO has seen a report as to what happened in that.
No, I haven't at this stage because it is actually still being investigated because obviously there were deaths involved in that incident. It sits with the coroner. And as soon as we have received the report, we will be providing it to members. But obviously you can appreciate it is still confidential.
Of course.
But the reason why this is being applied for is because that vehicle was actually instrumental into the delivery of the services for all councils,
No
and it
doubt,
wasn't expected for it to be out of action.
no
It
doubt.
would be covered through the insurance, but in the meantime, the organisation needs to purchase a new vehicle so it can continue to deliver its services. And
Okay.
following the investigations and whatever insurance outcomes there are, there may be further resources or finances in that. But this is for the organisation to continue delivering services.
Right. So what you're saying is that if we were found not at fault, or the Regional Waste Authority would find not at fault, that money would then be returned through the mutual liability scheme to the constituent councils?
I'm not an insurance broker or provide insurance. I don't
Right.
know what the outcome would be. I know the vehicles and the organisation is covered by the Local Government Mutual Liability Scheme, as is any other council. But this is, as would be any other emergency use of resources or funding to
Right.
replace a vehicle so they can continue to deliver the services. Once
Right.
we have the outcome of the accident, we'll provide it to members.
Yeah, okay. There's a lot of things that even yourself, you've just acknowledged you don't know, and that's what I'm worried about. And I know for a fact that you can go and hire equipment for a period of time, including prime movers and dog trailers and everything that they would need. I think it'd be more prudent to push for that and actually get some information to the constituent councils. And I've spoken to other members from other councils and they tend to agree before we go guarantor on a loan. I just think that's prudent financial advice, but you know, that's just my opinion.
Anybody else? Thank you, Councillor Burns, and then Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor. The CEO, thank you. You've answered sort of 3/4 of what I was wanting to ask. I just wanted clarification. So is the mutual liability fund, the insurance, they aren't assessing the claim or doing anything until the coroner has finished their findings, is that correct? Which is hence the delay, which is why they want a loan in the interim. Because normally with insurance, it's the policy they pay out. You can, get a replacement vehicle.
Yeah, again, that would be my understanding. I would need to follow up further, but my conversations with the CEO is that they did not have provision. They've got provision for replacement of some vehicles, but this was not actually part of that. So this is an addition to, and it's necessary for the fleet.
And I understand it's necessary, but I suppose
I don't know about the insurance question. Sorry.
Okay. It'd be good to find out.
Yep, I can follow that up for you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Kemp.
As it's written, I agree with the other two councillors that there's a lot of lacking of information in here as to, I know there's a very little cost to council, to us, so it's not that's not the issue. It's about proper information for us to make a right decision. And I guess, Fleurieu can actually hire vehicles to replace until they get a finding. And I'm sort of, anyway, we discussed the insurance part of it. So, but there's still a lacking information in this for myself to make a proper decision.
Thank you. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Similarly, it would be good to have that information, and I guess that's still something that's to come through. But I guess one perspective I have is, regardless of whether the funds are paid back to council and we can pay off that loan, or if they're not paid to council, we're still going to need that vehicle to be able to deliver the service to the community. So if it's the case of purchasing that and approving this loan, and then if that loan gets paid off, or if for whatever the findings are and it doesn't, I guess it doesn't change the fact that we still need the vehicle, and Fleurieu need that as part of their fleet. So I guess on that basis, I think there is enough, I guess, information to show that there's the need for, I guess, the approval of these funds.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. You said that the loan gets paid back to council. Council actually doesn't take out the loan. Fleurieu take out the loan. They pay it back. So we don't. We just need to give them permission. Sorry, insurance. Yep. Councillor Henderson. Sorry, you seconded the motion. I forgot to come to you.
You did admit to come to me. Yeah. Yes, but just on the notion of hiring a vehicle, I agree with Councillor Mann. To me, it's equivalent to renting a house until you buy. That rental money is money down the drain, basically. Same with this vehicle. They're going to have to replace the vehicle with a new vehicle at some stage. So the money they're going to use to hire a vehicle in the meantime is money that's not really useful. They need to purchase the vehicle in the short or long term. So it may as well be the short term and save money in the end.
Thank you, councillor Henderson. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Quaremba, you can close the debate if you.
Thank you. Just in regards to what Councillor Henderson said, actually, there's a lot of businesses that just rent because it actually better as a tax write-off. So to say to buy versus rent, that's a completely different argument. My whole point of what I'm saying is that we have very little information about what's going on. I'm not denying the fact they need a vehicle. And the other question needs to be asked is, this accident happened last year. What have they been doing in the meantime? Not using the bin, the truck, because I believe that truck picks up the hard rubbish or the waste that's collected at Yankalea and then takes it up to the depot, I think up towards Lonsdale or somewhere like that. I think that's what that vehicle is for. It actually carries all that heavy waste. They must still be doing the work. Are they hiring a vehicle? The whole point of what I'm saying is we have very little information and we're going to go guarantee $2.5 million loan. And I think it's prudent management to actually ask questions. Even the CEO acknowledged she has very little information regarding this. In fact, I'd like to do a defer motion until we actually have a report regarding what vehicle they're using currently, what the costs are, whether they can rent another vehicle.
You can't defer the motion, councillor Quaremba. You're closing the debate.
Can I make an amendment to my motion?
No,
then?
you're closing the
Okay.
debate. Closing the
Anyway.
debate, you can only,
Not a problem.
when you close the debate, you can only reiterate what has been said. You can't introduce any new information into the debate.
Okay.
So I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you.
Call the division.
All those in favour, can you please stand? Councillor Mann, Councillor Burns, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson. And against, Councillor Quaremba and Councillor Kemp. That motion has been passed. There are no matters of urgency. There are no questions on notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I'd just like Mayor, if you could explain a point of order to the chamber, because there seems to be a lot of confusion about how an elected member calls a point of order and the role of the mayor and what the mayor has to do. Would you just be able to read that out so we get these things exactly right when we need to?
Certainly. The presiding member may call an order a member who is in breach of the Act or the regulations. A member may draw to the attention of the presiding member a breach of the Act or the regulations and must briefly state the nature of the alleged breach. So if somebody is calling out a point of order, it's not because you don't like necessarily what I say, it's because there is a particular breach of the Act or regulations. And so when you call out a point of order, you need to be able to say specifically what that breach of Act or regulations is. The point of order takes precedence over all other business until it has been determined. The presiding member will rule on the point of order. If an objection is taken to the ruling of the presiding member, a motion that that ruling not be agreed with must be moved immediately. So if you disagree with my ruling on the point of order, then you must immediately say you object to that and put a motion forward that the ruling not be agreed with. The presiding member is entitled to make a statement in support of the ruling prior to a motion under sub-regulation 5 is put. A resolution under that ruling binds the meeting, and if a ruling is not agreed with, the ruling has no effect and the point of order is annulled. So that is what the meeting procedures say about point of order. The other important thing that the meeting procedures also talk about is the guiding principles. So you cannot have a point of order when there's the guiding principle being used. The guiding principles, the following principles, the guiding principles should be applied to with respect to procedures to be observed at a meeting of the council or at a council committee. Procedures should be fair and contribute to open, transparent and informed decision making. Okay. So one of the roles, if I think that there is information that is not correct or there is further information that is needed to inform the council, I can either provide that information myself if I have it, or I can request that the CEO or one of the directors provide that information. Procedures should encourage appropriate community participation in the affairs of the council. Procedures should reflect levels of formality appropriate to the nature and the scope of responsibilities exercised at the meeting. And procedures should be sufficiently certain to give the community and decision makers confidence in the deliberations under the meeting. So I think most of those are things that I think as a group we do pretty well. The main area where I think I'm challenged with a point of order is around procedures should contribute to open, transparent and informed decision making. And so because the guiding principles say that people need to be informed, if I think that there needs to be further information provided to you, I will provide that in line with that. Does that answer your
Thank you.
question?
That's just a good again, just clarifying exactly so we can, if a member calls a point of order, they should know why they're calling a point of order, and the process will take its due course. I do have a couple of other questions. With the Schoolies event, I didn't get the questions out in time. Who owns the Schoolies event?
Encounter Youth run the Schoolies event.
Do they own it?
Well, I'm not sure that they own it. They're an organisation who runs it and provides it. I don't. Do they own it?
Well, I wonder if
No.
the council does, because it's on council land. So
It's
No, we council lease the land to Encounter Youth to run the Schoolies event.
so through the mayor, if I may, it's a very good question, and it's one that's asked a lot. So Schoolies used to happen just naturally many, many years ago, and the Encounter Youth Group were the group that came in at the time to work with the state government, the education department, all the various state government authorities to help facilitate it. And it has evolved, and obviously Encounter Youth see themselves as a support mechanism to enable it to happen quickly. It used to go for over a week, and all of you have probably attended the various information sessions that they hold, and now it's obviously very streamlined. No one technically owns the event. They Schoolies Encounter Youth see themselves as a facilitator to come down and help support the event, which has naturally occurred down here for a long time. I think when the review was done a couple of years ago, again, all those various authorities were involved in that review, because it's not Encounter Youth's responsibility. They don't see themselves as just an event organiser, and they do hire, or council provides the grant for facilitating access to Wall and Reserve, and council also supports by way of its road closures. We don't fund the event, so our support is in kind as articulated in the report, and the rest of it occurs through negotiations with Encounter Youth and the various caravan parks, and also with the Education Department, SAPOL, Department of Transport, SA Ambulance Services, etc. So no one technically owns the event. It just happens here in Victor Harbor. And we have had conversations with the state government about if it was to move, it would need to be a joint conversation as to how that occurs.
Yep. My second question on Schoolies is around Business Victor Harbor was to be working with the working group on how to resolve some of the issues around businesses. I'm just wondering how that's going, because I haven't quite sure seen any feedback come back to the chamber on these issues, which may inform us a little bit better to where we give 2 or 3 years or 4 years in the future.
Yep. So Business Victor Harbor has still, as part of their monthly meetings with the mayor, myself and the deputy mayor, which you were involved in previously, does give them an update. They're still involved in those stakeholder groups which are held with Encounter Youth in regards to a debrief, and also in terms of the preparation for the event leading up to the event. Business Victor Harbor did try to do or facilitate some promotion with our city activation team about encouraging businesses to be open during the day when Schoolies was on, saying it's business as usual, all the things are still happening. We've made adjustments to the road closures, to the screening around the event, to also some of the other access points as a result of that feedback with Business Victor Harbor. Business Victor Harbor is still meeting with Encounter Youth. They've had some regular meetings with them around the event. So as far as I am aware, it's progressing. There are still people who don't support it and many people that do.
Yep. And my final question, if I may, Is any discussion been around co-location, in other words, sharing the event with another council, say Glenelg, for example, we just do it every bi-yearly and some sharing it around, so we give a little bit of relief to our businesses once a year.
Yeah, so there's not been those conversations, but nothing to say that they can't. We know that there was actually a significant number of schoolies actually ended up in Robe this year. So that was not an organised event. And that's the sort of thing that the, I suppose, SAPOL more broadly and SA Ambulance are trying to avoid. They'd rather have it within a controlled environment. But again, they're conversations that we can have because there will be more debriefing meetings and probably obviously meetings as a result of this report that's been to council. And I think it was as a result of some conversations, I think you raised the matter about the item coming earlier to the chamber because of tickets already being sold to an event that council hadn't previously approved the Wall and Reserve for. So hence we're getting to you straight up in January. And also the discussion around giving 2 years with conditions was maybe a way of alleviating that because they promote, the schools and the students are already gearing up for events that may or may not occur. But yeah, happy to take all the questions you've had on board back to those forums.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Quaremba, you had your hand up before. Question.
Just a couple of questions. Councillor Kemp obviously asked or answered one of them about moving the event maybe to another venue and then bringing it back and sharing what is some people believe such a joyous event. Maybe Alexandrina might like to enjoy the company of all the young teenagers. But that question's already been answered. But has it actually been put out to an actual asking these councils? Has Victor Harbour Council actually asked other councils, surrounding councils, whether they would want the event?
I think Victoria just answered that with David Kemp said no.
Exactly that. No, we haven't had the question. The only time we had a discussion with all of the various stakeholders, key stakeholders, was during COVID.
Yeah.
And that was about because it was about trying to contain the event even more. And there was a discussion of possibly whether it be held in Adelaide. But again, to move what sort of is almost like a rite of passage that sort of happens, because it's not just the caravan parks. We have many of our holiday homes are taken up by kids that are just hired out. So again, I'm happy to take the conversation up with those groups, but as far as I'm aware, this council only has explored moving it around our city to other ovals because there were some things that came to the chamber before my time. I think Encounter Oval was one of those, or another location outside of Victor Harbour. But as to another council hosting it, again, happy to explore those if that's something the chamber's looking to do.
Okay, just a clarification question. You said that before Encounter Youth ran the event, Schoolies existed. So by definition, you mean that someone ran an event down here?
No, kids just came to Victor
Right,
Harbour.
so that's just literally a bunch
and
of
it
kids
just
coming
happened,
at the end of the year.
and there was a significant amount of damage, graffiti, property damage, incidents that occurred because it just evolved and happened with no organisation. And it was because of those incidents that happened some 25 or more years ago.
Yeah.
That my understanding, it was either, again, I could be wrong, but it was something like SAPOL or others went to looking at ways in which they could look to control it, and Encounter Youth were the ones that came forward and came up with a proposal around possibly managing the event because they had done other work in other areas of trying to support and encourage a more confined or controlled event. And that has evolved over the last 25 years that they have now been facilitating it because they don't see it as their event. They see it as they facilitate something that's would happen anyway.
Okay, it's interesting you say they don't see it as an event because it's their primary funding source. So that is their, and that's coming from the CEO.
Yeah, so yeah. I'm relying exactly what I'm told.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Burns, you have a question without notice.
I do, thank you. It was just more on clarification, and I thank the Mayor for a good definition of a point of order. That was my understanding as well. But I just want some clarification. Earlier last year, I was doing point of order if there was any issues around procedure or Local Government Act, and points of information if I had a question. And in March last year, you asked me to just use a point of order for questions and points of questions about legislation, which I did. And then in November, you pulled me up and said, hang on, that wasn't a point of order, that was a question. And I totally agree with you. And I just want clarity in that I'm happy to go back to using point of information, point of order, rather than everything as a point of order, because I think it's just too confusing. So point of order as you define, and point of information if I have a question.
You can, if you've got a question, just say, oh, you've got a question. A
I know,
point of,
just
point
for the
of,
correct
point of,
protocol,
point
that's all.
of, point of question isn't in the,
The point of
in
information
the,
is
point of information is not in the meeting procedures.
no, it's
Point of
under-
order is in the meeting procedures. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you have a point of information, I'm actually don't know what you're asking me. If you say, you know, through the mayor, I've got a question about this,
and
or
I'm
I'd
happy,
like,
happy to do that. It's just that you had requested everything as a point of order, and I just find that confusing. I much prefer to separate it as you've suggested. I'm happy to do that.
fine, thank you. Are there any further questions without notice? We now go to motions on notice, and we have one that was deferred and you weren't here at the last meeting, Councillor Quaremba, so we're back at this meeting around the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority replacement of damaged bins. If you'd like to propose your motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I propose that the City of Victor Harbor instruct the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority to replace rubbish bins that are damaged during the process of picking up of these bins by their trucks at their cost, not the owner of the bins.
Do you have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Burns. Do you want to speak to your motion, Councillor Quaremba?
I will, thank you, Mayor. Reading the motion, it's actually quite silly because, not necessarily the motion is silly, but the wording, because at their cost, it's actually, they don't make money per se, it's actually all councils. So essentially what I'm asking is to allow the community to receive a bin if it's damaged by an operation that is paid by them, and if that operation damages the property that is used to, you know, get rid of the rubbish, that council funds would be used to pay for that damage. That's essentially what I'm asking. And I noticed that, you know, there's a lot of commentary about the cost and all these other things. And I understand there's a cost with everything, but we are in the middle of a cost of living crisis. And a lot of the people that have come up and asked me actually are pensioners that are struggling just to pay their rates. And all they're asking for or saying is the bin got damaged. And I've actually experienced this myself. And I was told that I couldn't get another bin, that they looked at the video and it wasn't their fault and everything. And it just creates a lot of disdain for the Regional Waste Authority. And I think they do a lot of good work. So all I'm asking is to say, if the bin's broken, that it's paid for by the council. That's essentially what I'm asking, so that they can continue putting their rubbish out without it being all over the street.
Councillor Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. Similar vein, and I think the emphasis is on where the truck damages the bin. And look, sometimes it happens, it's, you know, accidental, it's not done deliberately, but it's just one of those operational things, and I think it should be replaced. It is different from if someone damages a bin, we've got an onus to look after our bins whilst they're in our care. I've also had a lid ripped off by the truck, and I ended up getting it fixed myself after going out 2 times to Fleurieu Waste Authority trying to get it fixed. I just gave up, it was too hard. So I just think a lot of people wouldn't go to that effort. And I just think it should be a no blame situation where the truck inadvertently damaged it. It just gets fixed or replaced, end of story. It's minimal cost. It's providing a service to our community. It's important.
I think when you say minimal cost, I think in the commentary it's got, it'll add $75,000 to the budget if we're going to,
Yeah,
going
but
to do
that's
that.
based
roundabout.
on replacing multiple bins, you know. I mean, wouldn't occur that often. And if it does, then there's a potential problem with training of the truck driver.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson?
I believe this is already covered in the policy under the responsibilities of the Waste Authority. Clause 6.1.1, it states, if bin damage has occurred as a consequence of the service provision Fleurieu will repair or replace the damaged part free of charge. The ratepayer resident will need to liaise directly with Fleurieu to request repair or replacement. So it's already covered. So I'm not sure this motion is necessary at all. We're just doubling up.
Thank you. Councillor Schiller.
I can see what Carlos was trying to get to, but I think the policy, as mentioned before, is covering those situations where Fleurieu, their drivers are at fault. And I think as we are responsible for our own bins, and if we, I've had my bins since I moved here 16 years ago, and they're kept in a shady location, and that sort of keeps their life a lot longer than maybe if someone's leaving it out in full sunlight. So I think we could see an increase in people requesting the replacement of their bin. I would like to more be interested in seeing whether the location of new bin lids and the clips, whether there's the capacity to have some of those stored in Victor Harbour. I've had an incident where an elderly person living in Victor Harbour couldn't get to Gore, and that particular service might be worth looking into, where just some of the small items like lids and clips and possibly one or two bins, if that's a possibility. But obviously that's having to work out how you invoice those people. But from the perspective of people getting across to Gore, that can be an issue.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller. That's a good point. Any further discussion? Councillor Schofield.
Just having a look at this, my question is that as the Waste Authority represents or works for 3 or 4 councils, would this motion then have to go to the other councils as well? Or would this be just a service that we are providing for our community, therefore it becomes our responsibility and not for ours?
Okay, through the Mayor, if I may, as it's to do with our policy, it already is within our policy. So each council can have its own policies as to how it administers service. So it would be if there was anything in addition to what's in our policy, then it would just be an additional cost to the City of Victor Harbour. It doesn't mean it has to be a blanket across the other councils.
Councillor Kemp, you had your hand up.
I support this, and because I've had quite a few number of people who've approached Fleurieu about their bins being damaged, and of course if the video doesn't show it exactly how the truck and how they shake the bins to get the contents out, sometimes they come to the party, sometimes they don't, but for a small cost around $3,000 a year we'll be providing a service, because when they look across the July to November 24, there's only 195 calls from 4 councils. So it's not a great deal. It's not really happens. And of course, the $75,000 figure comes back if we replace all the bins to all households. So we're not replacing all the bins. We're only replacing the ones that are damaged. And even according to the statement here, that if Fleurieu were to replace rubbish bins that are damaged during the process of picking up of bins by their trucks at their cost, this cost will be passed on to the council. So we'll be paying for it anyway. So I just think that we need to provide a service to our community. And it's not like a big deal. So I think that's something that we should be considering, and in providing that good service to our community. And 9 times out of 10, it's the truck that does damage anyway. I can't see poor old Mrs. Smith at 95 years old taking the bin down the driveway, causing much damage to it. So I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Mann, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. No, I definitely appreciate with the sentiment behind the motion. I guess I'd probably have to agree with Councillor Henderson around, it does very much sound like this motion is saying the same thing that's already in the policy and what Fleurieu already do. I think some of the discussion around the commentary suggest more around the potentially looking at a review process around how Fleurieu are making those decisions around when a bin's being damaged, because I guess the same result could have where the community member says, oh, the bin's been damaged during pickup, and Fleurieu say, no, it wasn't. And I don't think this motion's necessarily achieving a result that solves that problem. So maybe it's something that's more going back and dealing with Fleurieu around having a bit more of a discussion around what that appeals process, how they're judging that, and if it was just instead of council considering a thing of looking at replacement of all bins at any time, what does that implication look like? Because I think that's probably getting at more of what the sentiment of the commentary is getting towards.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Schofield, have you got a question?
Yes, I have. Look, I understand where this is coming from, and we're saying that this could be 72,000.
Sorry, Councillor Schofield.
The question is that this relates to a $72,000 per year if we had to replace all the bins. My question is to Kelly, if we were going to put this motion in place, where would the money for the replacement and the purchase of bins come from, and where in our budget deliberations would we put it? Because it is, to me, and I could be wrong, and I believe it's an unknown territory, and if for some reason we had a cyclone and we were going to replace all our bins, have we got that amount of money in our budget? That's all. Where would the money come from? What would we have to put in place to cover something like this if we were going to do it? And I know it's a bit out of the...
Through the Mayor, so if this was put into place, we would likely need to increase the budget within the waste collection area for the replacement of bins, because we would receive higher invoicing from Fleurieu if they were in fact replacing more bins. And we would need to build in an allowance to future budgets, which we would then raise rates for, depending on the uptake and what those sort of changeover figures are. If it was just looking at a small number, you know, that wouldn't be too great. But if there was a greater uptake than expected, that allowance may need to increase.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Carol. Councillor Quaremba, would you like to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to reiterate to elected members, this is not about replacing every bin every year. This is about replacing bins that the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority have damaged through their actions. Nothing more, nothing less. The situation is such now that if you make a complaint, and I've had to do this, you call up and you say, my bin was damaged by your truck. Okay, we'll look at the video. No, we didn't do it. That's the end of the story. There's no recourse, no argument. I don't think that's fair. It is council money. We have to just assume. And also, Councillor Mann alluded to the fact that maybe we need to look at the review process. I would hesitate to say that the review process would actually cost more than the bin replacement itself. So it kind of would be superfluous to do that. So all I'm asking for is for the bins to be replaced that get damaged by the Regional Waste Authority. Nothing more, nothing less, no big budget extravaganzas, just those bins. And according to the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority, it wasn't many anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Quaremba. I'll now put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's been carried.
On the division.
All those in favour? Councillor Mann, Councillor Burns, Councillor Quaremba and Councillor Kemp. And those against, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Henderson. That motion has passed. We now move on to 18.2 and Councillor Mann, you have a motion on notice in relation to stamp duty waiver.
I'm happy to move the 4 on block if the chamber are.
If the chamber are happy for that, I'll put it to Councillor Mann to move his motion on block.
I'll read the 4 out. First, the City of Victor Harbour right to the South Australian State Government requesting they extend the current stamp duty exemption for first home buyers to include the purchase of existing homes for the entire state, or if not the entire state, for purchases in regional and rural communities, including the City of Victor Harbor. 2, the City of Victor Harbor write to Alexandrina Council and the District Council of Yankalilla, informing them of our stamp duty advocacy and asking them to consider advocating the same from a regional perspective. 3, the City of Victor Harbor write to the Local Government Association of South Australia, requesting they advocate for the above changes to stamp duty laws to include the purchase of existing homes in the first home buyers exemption, and that a motion to this effect is included in the next LGA annual meeting for consideration. 4, that the council supports the proposed item of business as provided attachment 2 to be submitted to the Local Government Association ordinary general meeting.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Henderson, thank you. Would you like to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to this? Councillor Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually very supportive of this. I raised something similar when we had the state government down for when they were discussing their strategic plan, and also talked to the ministers about this when they came down to Victor Harbor. There didn't seem to be a lot of appetite, but I just think it doesn't hurt to write and request it. I think that it is something that is important to people, and it's a huge cost. I know they get a lot of revenue, but I actually think that it should be something that we at least try, and writing a letter doesn't hurt. So I'll be supporting this.
Councillor Schiller?
I'd like to propose an amendment. I'd like to withdraw the component which is requesting that it be statewide, and that we look at the option of it only being a regional delivery to regional areas to stimulate the migration, if you want to call it, of young people to the regions. And it has a dual purpose. It's going to allow regional towns to hopefully gain a younger population, but not to the extent where it's we're looking to go statewide. I think there is this danger that once we release stamp duty from the cost of an existing house, people are just going to spend another $40,000 extra, and the actual baseline price of a house may well increase. But I would be supportive of trying to advocate for a regional approach to get that stimulation in our community, but not so keen on a statewide approach.
Do the mover and seconder want to take that as a variation, or would you prefer an amendment?
No, I appreciate where Councillor Schiller is coming from. I'm happy to leave it as is. I think it's better to put it to the state government, asking to apply to the whole state and let them concede it down to a regional approach. Because I think in terms of even young people in our city and in southern suburbs, they're paying higher prices for houses already. So they are more disadvantaged by buying in the city as opposed to buying regionally. So I completely agree with the sentiment, and I've expressed the same in my commentary, but I think allowing the government to meet us in the middle is probably maybe a safer approach to get something across the line.
Yeah. So Councillor Schiller, you'll need to move an amendment to that effect. All right, is there a seconder to Councillor Schiller's amendment? Councillor Quaremba seconding the amendment. Do you want to speak to that amendment?
No, just that I agree with Councillor Schiller on the amendment and the reasons for it.
Councillor Schiller, do you want to speak to the amendment any further?
Just as mentioned, it's a dual purpose. We're trying to flush out young people out of the cities and make sure that we're seeing them come down here and support our elderly population. And by putting that incentive to all regional towns, it's a way that government can possibly show their commitment to regions. We see a lot of funding go to metropolitan areas, I think that this is a significant amount of money that state government will be having to forego. And I think we have more chance to get this particular amendment through than the original.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to the amendment? Councillor Burns?
Thank you. I understand where Councillor Schiller's coming from, but I happen to agree with Councillor Mann. I think you go to the state government with a higher option, knowing your fallback position is the regional. If you go with your desired one, you may not get anything at all. At least this gives them an option. And with state governments, it's always about doing the deal, always compromise. And I think, you know, you go for the most you can get, but as Brayden's got in there, he's got a fallback position. And I think that's a smart play.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak to the amendment? Councillor Henderson, then Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I see where Councillor Schiller is coming from, and I appreciate that point of view, but I support what Councillor Mann has said, and also in terms of equity, I think it has to be a statewide approach. Otherwise, we're being exclusive.
Councillor Kemp, you want to speak to the amendment?
I'll hold my time for the motion, not the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll put the amendment to the vote so that we are just voting on the amendment. All those who voting yes for the amendment and those against the amendment, that amendment is lost. We revert back to the original motion. And the original motion was Councillor Mann and Councillor Henderson. Those people who have spoken to the amendment cannot speak to the original motion. I think that just checking that that's correct. Correct? Okay, so those who have spoken to the amendment cannot speak again to the original motion. Does anybody want to speak to the original motion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. I commend Councillor Mann for this initiative, but I guess when you look at the money that the state government raises is our money anyway, so we're just giving our money back to ourselves in that respect. And if they approve this, they'll get the money somewhere else in other taxes. So it's not like you go achieve anything great deal except for the actual first home buyers. And of course, the reason why they only have the new homes is because it's creating work for trades, actually get more employment into the state to actually have that. That's the reason why they get it. I support it or vote for it. I'm not quite sure how it will go, but because of the loss of revenue by the government will lose out of this, they may not be but never know, they may change with the state election.
Any further discussion? Councillor Mann, do you want to close the debate?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, no, I just want to thank the chamber for the support of this motion. I think, I guess, I appreciate Councillor Kemp's comments, and I think it's, whilst it's not necessarily looking at the return of the funds, I think it's more around directing the investment of those funds into our younger people. And I think from a state perspective, there's still a lot, a lot of young people being lost to Sydney, Melbourne, London, and so I think retaining them in the state and I guess preventing that brain drain is also an important thing for the government to consider. But I think more largely, I guess with young people, what we're seeing is, I guess, younger people becoming more disenfranchised and disengaged because of how difficult it is in the current climate. So I think allowing and extending this exemption would mean a lot. I think, specifically in the context of Victor Harbour, where you have a significant amount of homes affordable homes that young people are prevented from buying into because they're not over 50. You've got a significant amount of new homes being built, which have a really high price point that I guess arguably quite unaffordable for first home buyers. And then thirdly, I think you've also got the situation where we've got a lot of people from Adelaide and elsewhere wanting to purchase their shack or their holiday house weekender in Victor, and competing with our local residents and young people as well. I guess the fact that 40% of our homes are non-resident ratepayers just go towards that case. So I think anything the state government can do, and as they said when they came down here recently, they're willing and wanting to support our young people. and help, especially with the housing crisis. So hopefully this is an option that they'll take on board. So I appreciate the support.
Thank you, councillor Mann. That closes the debate. No, sorry, that closes the debate. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. We now move.
All the division. Sorry, I might have.
Call a division. Those in favour? Councillor Mann, Councillor Burns, Councillor Kemp, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Henderson. And those against, Councillor Quaremba and Councillor Schofield. That has carried, thank you. We have another motion on notice, reviewing our community plan and considering creating a strategy to receive a younger, more balanced demographic.
I'm happy to again move them both on block if the chamber are.
The chamber's happy with that. Councillor Mann, would you like to move your motion?
Thank you. First one, that throughout the plan consultation process on the proposed revisions to the Community Plan 2030, administration further review the plan through the specific lens of whether it goes far enough at prioritising and achieving the attraction and retention of young people and the eventual accomplishment of a younger and more balanced demographic. And findings of this further review are presented with the consultation results for council members' consideration and finalising the review of the Community Plan 2030. Number 2, administration investigate and prepare a report for consideration as part of the 2025-26 budget discussions for the development of a strategy aimed at achieving a younger and more balanced demographic for Victor Harbor through the attraction and retention of young people, which considers/includes A, extensive and targeted consultation with an incentive for participating, B, insights into how many local young people are leaving and how many are choosing to stay and why. C, asking how the City of Victor Harbor and our community can better support young people. D, plan deliverables that vary from short-term solutions to long-term ambitious and strategic projects. And E, creating a greater network between our schools, business, community and young people.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I guess where this motion's coming from is, I guess I see Victor Harbor very much at a fork in the road moment. I guess that the current, on one path, we've got that current approach, that status quo, where what we've been doing is we've been talking about the importance of retaining and attracting our young people and achieving a few positive steps in that right direction, I guess. But ultimately, I believe that path won't keep up with the expected growth, especially in our elderly population that we're seeing in the future. Even in the current UGMS or draft and what's in the report, is we've got Victor's population of 0 to 44-year-olds increasing by 2,975 people by 2051, whereas the population of 45 to 85 plus will increase by 5,895 people. And I guess with the amount of growth that we're seeing in our town, specifically directed towards either over 50s lifestyle villages, and you'll find one at nearly every corner of Victor being built at the moment, and also, I guess, more high-end new residential developments targeted with a higher price bracket. I think it only encourages a greater influx of maybe retired, wealthier people coming to reside to Victor. But I guess down that other road is potentially a new approach I see for the City of Victor Harbor, where I guess we not just talk about the importance of a balanced demographic, but we actively make strives to achieve it and to make it as difficult for young people to leave the City of Victor Harbor as possible. And I guess that approach requires a lot more alignment of our priorities, projects and funding towards the attraction and retention of younger people. You know, this approach isn't just about our young people, it's if not more about our elderly residents. You know, already we all hear about the time it takes to get into the doctor or to see a physio or allied health professional, people who access funding from the government but can't find anyone to support them or provide that in-house care. Also we hear about the main street and its lack of vibrancy and you know, the comments about the amount of op shops. We're already seeing these things, and where we're headed in the direction, I don't think is necessarily a situation that's going to necessarily improve that unless we make some serious steps in the right direction. And so I guess this motion, the community plan, is our high-level strategic, ambitious plan. And so that strategy really needs to be grounded in and understanding that we're wanting to prioritise a balancing of our demographic. But, you know, that plan is only a plan. It's what sets that strategic ambition. We need the strategy as well that will inform what projects we're going to do, what things we're going to try and achieve and work towards. And that strategy is informed by discussions with our young people, you know, the ones that have left and the ones who've chosen to stay. So I think that's, both of them go hand in hand. You know, I guess take Councillor McKenzie, for example, who hate me saying this because he's way too humble for his own good, but he is a prime example of the benefits of trying to retain a local young person. You know, went to school down here, went up to town for uni. He's settled down here, shows, you know, start a family down here. He's started a cafe, a building company, hires about 30 people locally, mainly young people. You know, if we, you know, he's one of a kind, but, you know, if we could get 10 more of him, that's an extra 300 jobs for our, you know, local community. So I think we need to be doing more to try and retain those who already have that connection to Victor, but also make it a place that people want to come and live to, because we need to balance out the demographics, or there won't be the population and the workforce to support an ageing and elderly population. So I hope you support this. And again, it is just to consider doing this in the budget deliberations. We're not committing to it. I just think an investigation discussion is important.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Henderson, you seconded that motion. Would you like to speak?
I think really Councillor Mann has said it all, and I do appreciate his vision because I think it's excellent. I do have a question though, and Councillor Mann has already talked about the budget, the future budget. My question is to administration. Is this possibly deliverable?
Through the Mayor. So part one, absolutely, because it's actually looking at something we're already doing. So it's within existing resources. And the investigation of what a strategy would look like would obviously need to give consideration of the development of a strategy and the costs. I think that's very achievable. It's like any strategy, there would be a budget associated, but not significant. It's what the deliverables are within that strategy that you would then need to look at the costs and prioritise and position the council, your budgets moving forward. So the motion as it is, I think very affordable with minimal costs. It's actually whether you put money behind your strategy is the challenge for the council.
Thank you. Councillor Schiller.
I'm fully in support of this motion. We sort of touched on it a bit at our last meeting when we had another motion on notice come about, looking at trying to get young professionals that can actually learn within our city. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I think we need to look at every single part of a young person's life and see if we can actually try and bring those sorts of things into the township. If we don't know what they want to in their leisure time, they're just going to go where they can find it, and it won't be here.
Thank you. Councillor Burns and then Councillor Quaremba.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of this. I'm actually really quite interested in what the feedback is. Where I've gone out talking to lots of young people at youth groups, in Grosvenor Park, at church groups, sports groups and so forth, they've said the following: a lack of affordable accommodation and house prices, a lack of jobs, a lack of mentoring and apprenticeships, and a lack of entertainment facilities for youth. They were really some of the main things that came out. So I'd be interested in actually getting that broader feedback that we can feed into our strategic planning. I think it's very important, because otherwise we tend to just focus on, you know, businesses or different areas, and they're almost a forgotten layer. Oh, sorry, almost forgotten layer.
Thank you. Councillor Quaremba.
Thank you, Mayor. I can understand what Councillor Mann's trying to do. And this is something that's one of his pet projects, or he's really interested in. I get that. At the end of the day, the market will dictate who comes to Victor Harbour. Unless we're going to do the things that Councillor Byrne alluded to, start building affordable housing, a nightclub, or somehow employing younger people, which then would have to be mandated. This level of social engineering never leads to any good, and it's against all free market principles. I think I understand what he's trying to do, and I'm happy to go through it. There's a couple of questions that I have. When we talk about incentive for participating in the targeted consultation, are we talking about paying people to be part of the consultation? Because we normally have a pretty lackluster review when we come to these sort of engagements. So I'm just want some clarification around the cost for the whole thing, really. But go ahead, investigate. But at the end of the day, the market will dictate what happens. And likewise, if there's a lot of people move down and they're going to need services, then more allied health will be built. Things that those people want will be built. But if you're trying to stop elderly people from coming Victor Harbor, I'm completely against that, because that is socio-engineering and that's not good for anywhere.
Councillor Kemp.
I'm not quite sure whether this motion sits in the 30-year plan, or sorry, the community plan. I just asked the CEO because we would be sort of singling out one sector of the community in our community plan, what we're going to do for them. So I'm just wondering whether it sits in another plan somewhere else, or a strategy. Maybe UGMS might be a better place to put it. But I support the initiative of what Councillor Mann is doing, but just wondering whether it's in the right position.
Through the Mayor, I believe it is from a higher level. The community plan is probably the best document. I mean, we do already articulate within that the community wellbeing services that we provide, our ageing community support that we provide, our environmental protection are already identified, and so is youth to a certain extent, but it's certainly not articulated really clearly. So from a high level, yes, we can. The urban growth management strategy is much more around our growth in terms of infrastructure and community infrastructure to support that growth. So again, there would be elements, and there is references within that already. The strategy is where you would probably articulate it a little bit more and delve more deeply into what you plan to achieve and be a bit more structured. And that would be very much like your economic development strategy or your environmental management strategy, where you got specific targets or projects that you're wanting to do to eventually reach or bring to fruition that bigger vision that's in your community plan.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting point because again, as Councillor Quaremba said, you know, the market will determine who lives down here and what's being built. We can't social engineer our community, but we certainly can, again, as Councillor Mann's put, we can have a strategy to look at if they do get an influx of young people, how do we then manage them and their living and all those types of things possibly. So I'm not quite sure whether the strategy will achieve itself in recommendation number 2. It may just be words that sit in a document or sit on a shelf and gather dust because it's something you can't implement. But I guess we go through the process of looking at what it would look like.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, would you like to close the debate?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. And yeah, just thank you to the Chamber for the consideration. I think some excellent points have been brought up and which will all be teased out as we investigate what this will look like. Because I'm not putting anything in stone. It's up to a discussion of the Chamber and where we all think, and I guess just a few comments, an incentive for participating. I know I'm very unlikely to fill out a survey unless there's an incentive there, or I feel especially drawn to complete it. But if it was a prize, or it doesn't have to be much, but just an element, not necessarily paying for everyone to receive, because again, that's all a budget consideration that would come out. But that's something that can be discussed. In terms of the comments around the market will dictate who comes to Victor Harbor, I completely agree with that. And the market's dictating that it's elderly people at this stage. We're seeing a rapid increase in the amount of aged care facilities, over 50s, community villages, and a higher bracket of housing development too. The reason the developers are coming in is because they expect people to continue to come down and retire to Victor. That's not going to change, and we're not trying to change that. What I continually hear from the community is that they want us to help manage growth in a sustainable way. And growth isn't just about the physical infrastructure, it's also about the social infrastructure. And I don't take it as being social engineering or anything of that that level, but it's more around what is a council or as it's a community, because the council is just acting for the community. What are we doing to attract people who will come and be able to support the population who are naturally going to be coming down here? What are we doing to keep our young people who've grown up here and their parents or grandparents don't want them to move away? And I think the community, from I guess the people I'm talking to, is that they want us to play a bit more of a role in this space, because as I've outlined at the moment, we don't have a strategy that tells us what young people want and then have a plan for how to deliver those things. So I think as a bare basics, that is a very good way to start. And I think the other thing as well is that plan can dictate what the younger people are wanting. The projects we have can inform it. It could be something as small as, okay, well, comparatively, the amount of money we currently dedicate towards youth and young person development is very small. So let's look at how we could increase that over time, or what that may look like. It could be something as bigger as, okay, if the market's not looking at any affordable housing, is that something where council could play more of an advocacy role or a project role? It's looking at strategic, it's trying to get our heads out of, I guess, the day-to-day and look at what does the strategic future of Victor Harbour look like. And I think it is with our young people as well. So I appreciate the support, and I look forward to working with the council on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And I think that's a great strategic recommendation, Councillor Mann. And I think, even getting that balance right so that we have got enough young people that can support the older population here is really important, because already many of our nursing homes and facilities that are trying to support our older population can't get the young people in to work. So keeping young people here, I think, makes great social sense. It makes great economic sense. And I think it would benefit Victor Harbour if we were able to find a way of doing that. So thank you very much for bringing that forward. And yet there's more.
Yeah, sorry, last one.
Did you have any steak knives?
Sorry.
Any steak knife? No, that's an old person's joke.
Yeah, no, it's got straight off my head.
You get given this and you get given that and that, and you get a whole lot of steak knives thrown in at the
There we
same
go.
time.
Yeah.
You have another recommendation here in relation to considering waiving council rates for first home buyers.
Yeah.
If you'd like to move your recommendation.
Thank you. So motion is administration investigate and prepare a report for consideration as part of the 2025-26 budget discussions for the waiver of council rates for first home buyers for the period of 2 years for the purchase of an existing home or 3 years for the construction of a new home. And the investigation report considers the followings: the financial benefits of attracting and retaining first home buyers, the financial detriments of delaying rates growth and or temporary loss of existing rates income, the most affordable and efficient way for administration to apply the intent of this waiver, a reasonable upper limit on the amount that can be waived, ensuring no conflicts of interest for elected members through a specific exclusion or otherwise, the collection of data and annual reporting on uptake, and a planned 6-year review to assess results and reevaluate if needed.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Henderson again. Thank you. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Mann?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I won't go into too much detail. It's all in the commentary there. I guess this is just an idea of something that may be able to help support, attract or retain our young people. I guess in terms of, in the scheme of purchasing a house, 2 or 3 years council rates waiver isn't much, but I think when you look at the financial outlay for someone as a first home buyer buying a house, it's all of a sudden they've got council rates, they've got home insurance, they've got interest and principal on their mortgage, which what we're seeing is significant at the moment. So I think this is something that at the very least we should be considering, which all this motion is, as part of those budget discussions, to look at whether there is any merit in doing something like this. And I think it shows our younger community that council is looking and considering them and exploring different ways of how we can help them. I think in terms of first home buyers, I'm not wanting to, and again, it's up for discussion with the chamber, but I guess from my perspective, it's not necessarily putting an age limit on that, because if you're someone in your 80s and you've never been able to afford your first home, but again, you get into the position of being able to, then I think maybe that you should be able to get the same rates waiver as a 30-year-old. I guess as well with this one is it adds, I think, anything council as a Victor Harbour can actively do to advocate and market ourselves as somewhere trying to attract and retain young people is a good thing. Even 2 weeks ago, the Sunday Mail had a big cartoon of the Victor Harbour's entry sign, in quotations, the motto of God's waiting room. So that is the reputation we have in the state and in the media. And I think anything the council can do to help try and buck that or try and provide a contrast to that. So young people don't just come down to Schoolies, have a good weekend in Victor Harbour and then forget about us. I think there's so many benefits of living here. I certainly couldn't imagine living anywhere else. And I think this motion just does something to explore what this could look like as an option. But again, I'm very open to discussions through those investigations or what other members may be able to add to this. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
I don't really need to speak to it again. Councillor Mann has said it all, but I do have a question. In terms of the financial cost of delaying rates growth, the data would need to be obtained as to how many first home buyers there are, the percentage of purchases, and how accessible is that information. I'm just wondering how we obtain that information.
Through the Mayor, we would need to give that some consideration. We may be able to get some statistics through talking to different industries and pulling some information that way. We may be able to get some things from the census in terms of how many people are down here in that sort of age group and things like that could likely take up. But we wouldn't be able to get all the data, but we could do some scenarios in terms of what it would look like if there was this much uptake and this much uptake, depending on that sort of situation. But we would need to source some data from other parties to try and give us an idea of what to model.
So just a follow-up question, Mayor, if I may. So it would be a guesstimate, really, an estimation. We wouldn't have the full data, in other words.
Through the Mayor, yeah, absolutely. It would be basically providing some scenarios around what that would look like if so many people took it up, and then what that implication is in terms of council's income and holding off on that income going forward, and what the projected impact on the rest of the ratepayer base would be. But we could at least, we'll be able to provide some scenarios for you to consider whether that's an option worth us putting more funds in towards to get some more accurate data.
Councillor Schiller and then Councillor Burns, and then is that your hand up, Councillor Quaremba? Councillor Quaremba.
Thank you, Mayor.
No, sorry, Councillor
Oh, yeah, I
Schiller.
had my hand up, sorry.
Councillor Schiller, then Councillor Burns, then Councillor Quaremba.
I'm supporting the motion just purely on an investigative basis. I think that it's fraught with inequity, but we need to weigh up whether this is going to be an actual draw card for young people. But we have many other people come to us seeking a rebate on rates, and we had that occur with a group that came to see us at a workshop only a few months or so ago, looking for a significant rate reduction because of their financial situations. So that's my thoughts, that I'm happy to investigate, but I'm going in very guarded.
Thank you. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also supportive. I would be very interested in seeing what information administration can find out. My only desire is there's actually a financial cap on the new home value, probably 500,000, because otherwise you get people with $1 million houses, whatever, are going to apply for this. So to stop it being abused, it really should be targeted at the market that can afford that this is aimed at. So I would feel given you can get houses around Hayborough for 380 to 450, I think having around about 500,000 would be a safeguard. And there's got to be some sort of limit in that, depending who you're trying to attract.
Okay, thank you. I didn't think you could get a shed in Hayborough for 380. Councillor Quaremba.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, I'm a little bit cautious with such a thing for the simple reasons like Councillor Sheila alluded to, that, I mean, the 6 years, are we talking about running this for 6 years potentially and then reviewing? Because if this does take off, we could be really in strife when it comes to reduction in rates, considering that we're already kind of at the moment, I think we are under our, what is it, our asset renewals, I think they're now under target, I believe. Is that right? Funding? And
We do more new than renewal, but
Right.
yeah, it's not because you're not aiming to do that.
No, I know we're aiming, but I'm just saying that this is potentially a reduction in funding for the council. Like, I understand why Councillor Mann is trying to do this totally. But yeah, I'd be happy to go through to the review, but they're the things. And the only other thing that I would have to say there, and not having a dig at Councillor Mann, but making sure 0.5 would have to be, I'm assuming, for all elected members that have been elected, because, or is it just the duration while they're an elected member?
That would be up to discussion when we do the report and consider it and just talk about it.
Right, because I'm assuming that if you didn't do it for the whole life of the elected member, that could be seen as a extreme conflict of interest if you were to be a first homeowner at some point.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp?
I'm not supporting this for a few reasons. One is we're sending a message to our community that we are discriminating against the rest of the community by allowing new home buyers to actually have a discount on their rates. I just don't think that's a good message from council to its community, because there's a lot of people out there with cost of living issues which are struggling to pay their rates, but they pay them, they find a way. And if they're really hard up, we've got a hardship clause which anyone could apply for. So a new home buyer has any issues with council rates, they can go have a hardship clause like anyone else in the community. I think we need to be equitable to our community and not just point out one section of the community gets a bit of a lift up. Again, if this goes through, we'll and get some rates, reduce rates for certain groups of people, and then do we have to raise rates to cover those losses? Because we run our council on rates. That's our main revenue, and we're going to start giving it away. Now, we give rate rebates of 75% and 100% to specific organisations, and that's already been covered, and we vote on that every year. So to have new home buyers, and I understand that there's a lot of costs.
First home buyers, not new home buyers.
Sorry.
First home buyers.
First home buyers.
So people who are buying a
Yes.
home for the first time.
Okay. Whether it's new or existing, again, I think it's just the fact that we just need to send the right message to our community that, we're all equitable to all our people, and everyone has a hardship. And look, what about the person who lost his job and can't pay the rates? Do we give exemption to people who are on the dole or getting first, those types of things as well? So I think this is very muddy waters where we're sitting if we go through this. And I think that just even discussing it again could send the wrong message to our community. So I don't support this at all.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, Councillor Mann, can you close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, once again, I guess thank the chamber for the excellent discussion. I think some brilliant points have been raised, and I guess just addressing a few of them. In terms of getting the data, potentially the state government may be able to advise us how many first home buyers there have been in the past few years within the city of Victor Harbor. Also, I guess in terms of Councillor Schiller's point about the motion being fraught with inequity, I guess chatting to a lot of young people, they would say the current housing market is also fraught with inequity, and I guess how that's been happening, I guess, across the generations and where young people sit now. Councillor Stewart, Councillor Burns, I completely agree about having a financial cap and have included that in the motion as well. I guess just to let you know, the current average house price in Victor Harbor is $650,000. So a $600,000 cap. I don't think that's probably a great cap, maybe a little bit higher than that. And it'd be good to see houses between 380 to 500,000. Yet to see Yep. Well, the last one I saw was 440,000, but it was in a over 50s retirement village. So it excluded a lot of young people in that sense. I guess in terms of Councillor Quaremba, I guess the point about if this takes off, we could be in strife. I guess the only strife would be being overrun with young people. And if that solved the problem in 6 years, then we wouldn't need the strategy, or we can relook at things. So that wouldn't be the worst thing. And I completely agree. I would rather be able to vote on this and achieve this for young people if it meant being completely excluded. So I've got no problem with that. And again, in terms of Councillor Kemp's point about discriminating against the rest of the community, I appreciate the views, and I think that's something that we need to flesh out. And through the community consultation process around the budget, we can get the community's views around this. This is something I've been canvassing for some time with a lot of people from multiple generations, and they all think it's a great idea and something that might just go a little bit towards helping our young people get into a young or older people getting into their first home. Because yes, there may be a lot of people in our community who may struggle to afford rates because we know they are on fixed incomes, but again, a lot of them are asset rich in the fact they're sitting on an $800,000 house potentially. Whereas, it's once people get into the market, then they can continue to grow with the market. Whereas, if you'd got in 3 years ago, you'd be probably around $300,000 better off than you are as a young person getting in 3 years later. So I think this is all something that we can consider. Again, it's not making any commitment at this stage, but I think it's an important thing for us to look at. We invest money in the Victor Harbour Business Association to try and attract businesses. So investing money in this sense, again, is just try to attract first home buyers, which I guess generally are more likely to be a younger population, which would achieve the desires that we've all expressed in the previous term motion. So I hope there is some support at considering this, and I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. That closes the debate. I'll now put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Motions without notice. Are there any motions without notice? Councillor Kemp.
My motion without notice is the council to conduct a public consultation on the 3 models of the community sports and rec precinct, which will go into the long-term financial plan. The reason why I've put this motion up is I think that will be good for the community, and it is not confidential, that the 3 models that we're looking at to go into the long-term financial plan, that I think the community should have a say in which model, because they're going to be paying for it through their rates and things like that. So I think they require that information.
Sorry, Councillor Kemp, I'll just interrupt you for a moment. That motion without notice, I think, really needs to be a motion with notice, and I'm happy to take it for the next council meeting as a motion with notice. It does involve budget going out to community consultation, and so I'd really ask that you put that in for the next council meeting as a motion on notice.
Thank you.
Are there any other motions without notice? No, in that case, then we move into confidential items. The first recommendation is that we go into confidence in relation to appointment to members to the Fleurieu Regional Assessment Panel. And we need to add Matt Atkinson to the confidential clause. Matt is the Group Manager for Regional Development at Alexandrina Council. And the council going into confidence is because there's information that's going to be discussed, the disclosure of which would involve the unreasonable disclosure, which would involve information concerning the personal affairs of any person. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, thank you. And seconding that, please, Councillor Schofield, thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much.